Happy Thanksgiving week. I've never made a video before and I don't really have time to practice, so I'm going to be reading a lot of what I'm going to be saying to you. And forgive me for my non-professionalness, but I'm a mother and a teacher. I live in Pleasant Grove, Utah, and I really want to get this message out, and I feel like I want to make a video. So today is November 24th, 2015, and in less than a week, on December 2nd, Congress is going to vote on ESEA, which is the reauthorization of the No Child Left Behind bill. Now, the bad thing about this is that they haven't seen the bill yet, and they haven't even been allowed to see what the small committee is cooking up. And this is un-American, and to do things in the dark and not to allow enough time to really read the bill or to debate the bill and then to be forced to vote on it despite not having read any more than probably a biased sheet of talking points seems really wrong to me. This week, my representative, Senator Mike Lee of Utah, has come out talking about this, and I really admire the things that he's doing. He said that from the surface it will look like the conference process is happening the way it's supposed to, but beneath the surface we know all of this has already been prearranged, pre-cooked, predetermined by a select few members of Congress working behind closed doors free from scrutiny. And we know that this vote was scheduled on extremely short notice so that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for the rest of us to influence the substance of the conference report through motions to instruct. And then he went on to say that because process influences policy, the process expedites the passage of policies that we know don't work, policies to which the American people are strongly opposed. He named two of those, the strongly discredited Common Core approach and the centrally planned failed model of federal preschool, which this bill wants to use $250 million to promote. There are many more terrible policies that ESEA will cement, but the first and most important thing that we need to oppose this on, regardless of what's in the bill, is the way it's being passed. You don't pass good bills in the dark without a debate. It's just not right. Please call 202-224-3121. That's the Congress switchboard. When you call there, you can ask for any senator or any representative by name and then leave them a message saying, please vote no on December 2nd on the ESEA bill, or you can also call it the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. And you can tell them, vote no, because there is an American process of open debate that is being neglected, and we need that process. We need to really analyze what's in the bill, especially when it's going to be a bill of hundreds, if not thousands of pages. Now, something that I want to explain is that earlier this year, there were two bills passed, one in the House of Representatives and one in the Senate. One was called the Student Success Act, the other one was called the Every Child Achieves Act, and they were virtually the same bill. They both wanted more data mining of students, more Common Core, although they never call it Common Core, they always call it college and career ready standards, and just more of the same, big government, less true local control, less parental authority, more federal authority. And so both of these bills were bad bills that I opposed, and I know that many people who think like I do, that are freedom lovers, oppose the bill. But I think the reason that the pushers of the bill were so successful in getting conservatives to vote to pass these bills, most conservatives voted yes on these bills. And the reason was that they had these talking points that sounded so good. They used words like reducing the federal footprint or restoring local control. These are words that I like, that you probably like, but they weren't true. They weren't actually what was in the bill. And now we're stuck with these two bills that this week, this little tiny committee of select congressmen is cooking up into a mega bill that they will call the new No Child Left Behind, that will be passed on December 2nd. Most likely it will pass unless thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of Americans pick up their phone and fight for their freedom. And the reason I say fight for their freedom is that there are four major things that are being threatened by this bill. And I'm going to talk about those four things, but you can boil it down to this basic philosophical difference. Do you believe that a parent is the primary authority over a child, and that the parent and the family, with the help of a loving teacher, should be determining what that child does in the classroom and in his career path choice? Or do you feel that the government, the nanny state, should use whatever means it deems necessary, and its favorite method is data-driven decision making? You hear that all the time. If you think that the government should be determining what that child learns and reads and is exposed to and ends up believing, that's the philosophical difference. And so all of these initiatives that have all different angles and all different names, they all boil down to that. Do we believe in individual power, or do we believe in giving our power away? My own representative, Jason Chaffetz, has also been in the congressional spotlight this week. There was a video that I encourage you to read. It's on YouTube, where they, Representative Chaffetz and others shed light on the wrongs of the Department of Education. They were specifically talking about student data collection and student data mining programs, and the hearing revealed that the Federal Department of Education has somewhere between 100 to 200 different ways that it collects data about your child and mine. And the department only admits to having 3 because it contracts out the rest of those means of data collection, as if that's better. The hearing revealed that the Department of Education has received negative scores across every category of data security, and Representative Jason Chaffetz gave the department an F, calling its data collection practices a monster, an absolute monster. Now, knowing that these hearings are going on, and knowing that at least some people in this country have serious concerns about the data that's being collected by the state and federal governments using interoperable database systems, would you want to pass a bill that further entrenches these data mining practices that are not secure without any debate on the subject? The things that Senator Lee and Senator Chaffetz brought up that were problems with the Department of Education and in alignment with this bill are not the only problems that are going to be in this bill. And even though the bill has not been released in final form, we know what's basically going to be there because of these other 2 bills that are being used to cook up the final bill. And so we also know what the pattern is of Senator Lamar Alexander, who is leading this, and some of these others that are leading it. So the 4 things that I am taking actually from a letter that I signed, and that I think 200 organizations across the country, and they're all local grassroots groups, like Utahns Against Common Core or Ohio Against Common Core, groups like this, as well as big important names like Michelle Malkin and others, have all signed this letter, and they have been asking Congress to please at least postpone debating on this until we have an administration elected that follows the rule of law. But a better choice would be just to get rid of ESEA altogether, but at least postpone the debate until we have a proper debate. So the 4 things that this letter outlined that I agree with are: the first problem is the Common Core itself. Now, the bill will never use the word Common Core. Most likely they'll use the word career and college ready standards. But if you do an internet search and just say, what's the official definition of career and college ready standards, you will come to the federal website that says standards common to a significant number of states. So there are no other standards common to a significant number of states in America other than Common Core. So the word college and career ready can be synonymous in every case with Common Core. It means the same thing, and it's very deceptive that they leave the word Common Core out of their bill, but they probably will. The letter calls the Common Core standards academically inferior, developmentally inappropriate, psychologically manipulative, and privately copyrighted, which I agree with. Then the second thing that they say is assessments that profile citizens. That's the second reason to oppose ESEA. The letter calls an over-reliance on tests, never independently validated, high-stakes standardized tests supervised by the federal government, tests that are psychologically profiling our children more than assessing their academic knowledge, a problem. Then the third reason to oppose ESEA, state longitudinal database systems. You may not be aware that when you register your child the first day of kindergarten or preschool, their name and their data, as well as your family data, goes into the state longitudinal database system. This is not the school's fault. They're being used as pawns. It's not the district's fault. They're being used as pawns. But the state longitudinal database systems are in every single state. They're interoperable, and they're built to federal specifications. So in essence, it's a federal database. And in addition to the state longitudinal database systems, we also have federal systems collecting data, such as the Federal EdFacts Data Exchange. Now, they will say that they're just collecting group data, which in some cases is true, but in many cases it's not true. It's individual data. And the FERPA law, that's the privacy law, the federal privacy law, was altered by the Department of Education just a few years ago to allow personally identifiable information to be released without parental consent. Before, you had to get parental consent. Now it's just a best practice. They did a lot of damage to FERPA besides that, but I want you to know that you can't rely on federal FERPA to protect your privacy anymore. It doesn't exist. And so the SLDS, if it were consensual, then maybe it would be okay. But it's not consensual. In fact, I tried to get out of it. I wrote to my state school board and said, can I please opt out of the state longitudinal database system because I feel like you're stalking my child? And they said, nope, you can't opt out. No opting out is permissible. So I find this is a real big problem. The fourth reason to oppose ESEA is that it relies on career tracking. So career tracking undermines self-determination by means of unconstitutional profiling. And some people might say, well, why is it a bad thing for the government to centrally manage? Why is it a bad thing for the government to say, oh, we need a whole bunch of scientists, for example, so don't major in poetry, major in science? Why is that a bad thing? Well, I think of a quote from my favorite Disney movie, which is The Prince of Egypt. And Moses says, no kingdom should be made on the backs of slaves. And you might think that's an exaggeration, but I don't think so. If you think about it, since student self-determination is undermined by the dictates of the government's workforce needs, even if it is data-driven dictatorship, it's still dictatorship. And since a student's interests won't be judged as equally important to a student's capabilities when the collective workforce, so the government, is the main determiner of what the student's career path should be, then we are creating a system for our children where they are not free. Maybe it is an exaggeration to say that education reforms are aiming to build a global kingdom on the backs of our children without their consent, but I think in the long run, it is not an exaggeration. The 4 points outlined by the grassroots organization, in my opinion, boil down to this. Either you believe that parents are a God-given authority over the child, or you believe that children's lives should be managed by the government for the building up of the government's economy in the style of countries without freedom, like China. Either you believe that individuals should control their own lives despite the risks that freedom allows, or you believe that the government should control the lives of the people because of the risks that freedom allows. I want you to really think about that. If you're getting sucked into believing the latter, please remember this. We, the people, created government. We own it. It did not create us, and it does not own us. It cannot boss us without our consent. Anytime government does a thing without the full informed consent of the governed, it is unjust, and it is corrupt, and it is dangerous. But government can and does get away with bossing and bullying when we let go of our own power. So I'm asking you to use your power to call and stop ESEA. 202-224-3121. Memorize it, put it in your speed dial. Call every day, ask your parents, ask your spouse, ask your sister to call and ask these representatives, number one, where do they stand? Are they planning to vote for it? And then if they are, why are they planning to vote for it? And then please ask them, because of the process that it's not being done in the light, to not vote for it. Even if they were to like what was in the bill, they should vote against it because of the process. It's an un-American process to just ram it through without reading it. Now, they're going to pass out talking points to all the Congress people who weren't allowed to be in the committee at the last minute. Because, look, they're probably going to release it on Thanksgiving Day or close to it, when no congressman in their right minds is going to be reading a bill that's probably 800 pages long. So they'll just resort to reading the talking points of people that they trust. And maybe they shouldn't necessarily trust those people. And the talking points will be partially true and partially lies. I know this because I read the last set of talking points that they came out with for the Student Success Act. And they were using words and phrases that appeal to conservatives, but they weren't true, and they were able to deceive us because of it. One example of that was that they successfully deceived our elected conservatives, saying that the bill would reduce the federal footprint and that the bill restores power to the states and localities, but that wasn't true. Instead of restoring power to the localities, it assigned enforcement of the federal vision to the localities. There is a big difference between having really local control and just being assigned the power to enforce what the federal government just told you to do. There's a huge difference, and they are not the same thing. They like to use the phrase local control because we use it, but they're hijacking our phrase, and they're creating something that is the opposite of local control and calling it local control. So the new bill will also use other phrases conservatives love, and they may also intrude on private schools and homeschools by offering them attractive services or grants in exchange for data. It's always about the data. Remember, knowledge is power, data is knowledge. They want the knowledge, they want the power, they want the data. Data is the gold. Data is the gold rush and the gold mine of our time. And so anytime they can give you anything, whether it's money or services or something else in exchange for data, they're going to do it. They want the data. And remember, the bill won't be written in clear language that is accessible to the average person. You'll have to really study it and find out what its words and phrases mean in definitions that are usually outside of the bill itself to really understand what is being traded and how your freedoms are going away. The bill and its talking points will probably use similar language that these previous bills used. For example, they replace parents very subtly using a government nanny compassion mentality. They will promote nanny state enabling concepts, including increased data mining to, this is a quote, to identify academic, physical, social, emotional health, mental health, and other needs of students, families, and community residents, end quote. So that last bill promoted full-service community schools and student needs and wraparound services and extended learning time that makes school, and not the family, and not the church, the central hub of a child's life. Now think about what the implications are. If a child spends almost all of his time and receives most of his physical, mental, emotional, and other needs from the school instead of from a family or from a church, then what happens? We become like communist China. It is wrong for you and I to sit by while the partnership of federal and corporate forces take away our authority, we the people, by changing who gets to define and enforce what learning means and what will be learned, taking this authority from the parent and teacher and reassigning it to the government because government knows best, nanny knows best. It is wrong for you and I to sit by while the federal government narrows academic freedom by dictating a workforce-centered, really communistic version of what academic success is for, the purpose of academic success. It is wrong for you and I to sit by while the federal government cements into federal law the Common Core standards, which, if you agree with them or disagree with them, is not the purpose of this conversation. The purpose of this conversation is to say that they were not constitutionally brought forth, and we need to rely on our constitutional method, which is representation and full informed consent. It is wrong for you and I to sit by while the federal government cements processes built on student stalking common data standards and interoperable state databases that report to the federal EdFacts data exchange, tracking children's academic and psychological data without consent. It is wrong for you and I to allow any kind of assessments to be mandated upon us by federal or state forces, whether in the form of formal standardized tests or in the form of stealthy embedded tests, which are the new trend, that are quietly woven into the daily curriculum and assignments of students, and that we can't opt out of those. These tests lock us into a federal definition of what academic excellence looks like, and will narrow academic creativity in classrooms that are built on one standard and one set of data tags and tests. They certainly make things more efficient, but at the expense of a teacher's professional judgment and her curricular liberty, and at the expense of parental and student autonomy. It is wrong for you and I to sit by while a few members of Congress ram a bill through, mostly in the dark, without allowing any space for analysis and debate. It is a truly dark and un-American process. Fight for your freedom with your telephone. These freedoms, once lost, won't come back easily. The freedom to define with our own conscience and intellect what education should look like, the freedom from invasion of our privacy, the freedom from being centrally managed and tracked without our consent. These are not small things. I'm asking you to call Congress and stop ESEA. The number to call is 202-224-3121. Happy Thanksgiving.